Hi, my name is Doug Rich. I'm a physical therapist. I graduated physical therapy school in 1994. Certified hand therapist as well as a physical therapist since 2005. Video game injuries are based on how you are playing them and what you're doing. There's three main types of video games. You got your personal computer, which have a lot of the same problems as people doing desk work. How long they're sitting at their desk, where their arm position is, where the screen is. Console games, which is what we think of as video games with remote controls. And then virtual reality, Wii type games where you're actually acting it out. So virtual reality, if you have something covering your eyes and you're wandering around, we're going to get trips and falls. Wii sports injuries, where you're performing the activity, cause injuries very consistent with that sport, such as tennis, you'll get tennis elbow. Bowling, you can get carpal tunnel, you can get shoulder problems. The reason why Wii Sports causes problems so much, even though you're not playing as hard, is you don't have to stop and take a break. So you're not going to play tennis and run around for 5 or 6 hours straight. Or with Wii Tennis, you may sit there and do that repetitive motion because you're never out of breath. So with those sports, and with almost all video game activities, it's about taking a break. When you're sitting at the console, when you're sitting at your chair, not going consistently 3 to 4 hours straight is the biggest thing you can do for the health of your hands and the rest of your body. When we talk about video game injuries, people mostly think of what are we actually doing with the console, where the injury is, and how much you're overusing the thumbs or the fingers. For the most part, there's not a high number of injuries with video games that aren't there with other people working at the desk. We do have something they call gamer's thumb, which also can be called a QUERVAIN syndrome is the most common term for that. QUERVAIN syndrome is pretty simple to test for. Just bring your thumb across the palm of your hand, curl your fingers around and tilt your wrist down. A sharp pain that occurs on the top of the wrist is a positive sign. That's usually overused repetitive squeezing and pinching with your hand, and that if you're holding the remotes too hard when you're playing the game can lead to that. Some of the treatments are pretty simple. There's some simple stretching of your thumb, and you can do this to prevent injuries too. If you're sitting down, pulling your thumb back towards your wrist, nice light stretch, you don't want any sharp pain with that. Hold it for about 20 seconds. So if you're doing that every hour you're playing a video game, that could be enough to hold this off. The other stretch is exactly our test. And before you're real painful, sit here with your thumb across your hands, bring your fingers in, and do a light stretch. Don't push into that sharp pain like when we were doing the test. And if there's any pain at all, then that's not going to be a stretch for you. I want just a light pull without pain. We have had better luck with some of those with trigger point dry needling and some electric stim that tends to run down that sheath and give us a little more blood flow in that area to help the scar tissue. QUERVAIN's tenosynovitis. Once we correct the imbalance between the adductor strength and the web space of your thumb, and the overuse and patterns, once we get that calmed down and get these thumb extensors working again without being compromised by the other muscles being too strong, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for that to calm down. Carpal tunnel syndrome is a compression of the medial nerve right where it comes into the front of the wrist right here in what's called the carpal tunnel. That will lead to numbness and tingling these first 3 fingers. That's the first time is usually sensation loss. Second sign is weakness when you're gripping, like lifting up coffee mugs. With carpal tunnel, repetitive gripping with an extended wrist will lead to that space there squeezing down on this nerve. Carpal tunnel with the numbness and tingling in your hands is also more painful for some reason at night. I think it's more the swelling going down your arm, but the research says it'll wake you up very often. One of the treatments for that is just a splint at night. I tell my patients that they don't like them, that's probably the ones that you need them. The ones that don't notice them don't need them at all. The reason why is usually somebody during their sleep has got their wrist in a bent position that cuts off the blood flow. So if they get the splint and they're fighting it all night, then they need it until they relearn a better sleeping position. The other thing is tennis elbow, which is vital epicondylitis, which is caused, there's a lower blood flow in this area of the elbow, but with repetitive wrist extension without a shoulder position to help, like if you're moving something like this over and over, which if you're real excited playing some games, that is a motion, will lead to swelling on this tendon and a strain. Both of those problems, you notice I'm talking about wrist extension, squeezing, and high repetitions. One of the biggest problems with video games is we're sitting with repetitive hand activities. And we're sitting, as soon as we're sitting there long enough, we're down in this posture. Our shoulders are forward, and now my arms don't work very much. They can't move, but I can still move my wrist, and that's why we end up with these overuse problems. The second problem with that posture is as I slouch down, I now cause a compression in the front. As this shoulder comes forward, I now cause a compression in the brachial plexus and the artery and nerves that go down my arm. With the decreased blood flow and the extra compression, and even with your head full, like with your head forward, you also get neural tension coming out of your neck. We end up with what they call a double crush. We may have a little problems in our wrist from that nerve being tight, but once we slouch like this, we now took all the slack out of that nerve. Now it's really tight. So simply correcting that posture and getting out of this position when you're playing video games is a huge, huge help for everybody. Treatment for tennis elbow. We need to stretch out that tendon, the extensor that hooks up to the elbow here. There's two main muscles that affect that. The extensor digitorum longus, which is the fingers, and extensor carpi radialis brevis. Those are the two main tendons that get inflamed at the elbow. Simple test for that is weakness with wrist extension, pain into the elbow with the finger like this, and pain with elbow extension while the wrist is flexed will give us a positive, what they call Cozen signs for lateral epicondylitis. Treatment for that, rest first of all, quit the repetitive activity as much as you can, change the posture, stretch out the front of the chest wall, watch the overuse activities with wrist extension, get to where it's more a full body motion, so you're not overusing the smaller muscles. Strengthening eccentrics, which is the controlled movement of lengthening a muscle more than shortening a muscle. And that tends to thicken up the tendons, which is where we have more problems, which was where we have more swelling at the lateral epicondylitis. Typical reasons people don't seek treatment for their symptoms is they will usually go away. You know, if I quit doing that, if I ignore it, it's going to go away. Quite frankly, that's true. I'd say 90% of injuries will resolve if you change your activity. If you're not going to change your activity, the chance of this injury not resolving becomes greater, and you're going to have bigger problems, and you're going to have more hurdles to jump through to get to recovery. Video game chairs out there that I highly recommend. My advice is every hour you got to get up and move. You don't have to quit what you're doing, you just got to break the posture. When we're talking about postures, it's forward shoulders, forward head. A general posture for everybody when they're sitting at a desk is something that everybody needs to look through. Even if you just take 30 seconds, stand up, move around. It's not enough just to stop and shake your hands and your fingers out. You need to move your whole body. This is all connected.